I read it, it's like, none of those places are here anymore. Remember Caldi's?
Yes.
They have Viennese cream on tap. It was an amazing place, it's gone now. And so I'm kind of glad that Jean and I published several books before Katrina. Now our books are like time capsules of the queer community in New Orleans before 2000, before Katrina, because there's no one else did that. So we're historically important as well.
I would like to think so.
Just ask, we'll tell you.
Yeah.
Well, unlike all the biggest guys, I actually read horror as a teenager. I was really, really into horror. And I wanted to be a horror writer. And so the first novel I wrote was very bad horror. And at some point, I decided I always write about the thing that I don't understand, the thing that is I can't get my mind around. And it seems like by writing about it, I don't know if I can say that I totally understand it by the time I get to the end, but I have a better understanding about it. So the thing that was really pop, and this is like was true of me when I was 18, and it's still true of me now, is this idea of justice, and I can't understand justice. I don't, and so I'm writing all these books in an attempt to, I think, understand it. And I work with inmates in Dayton, Ohio, and as well as students who at the university. But I teach inmates GED skills so that they can pass their GEDs. And so I think that justice, or the idea of justice, is all around me all the time. And there's these people who have committed these crimes who I'm teaching how to read. And I just want to know their stories, hear their stories, and understand what justice means to them. I'm obsessed with the idea of justice.
Thank you. All right, the next question is, hey, we're at the Saints and Sinners Literary Festival. It's an LGBTQ festival. What? Well, some are more sinners than saints. So what does LGBTQ, what does queer, how does that infuse your work, and what does it, how do you deal with it? Do you take it in? Do you work against it? Does it affect how you deal with an audience? It's really kind of an open question. And again, out to anyone on the panel.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think everyone's perspective is different when they write. I write about gay men. I write about gay male characters. I like to show people what the world looks like through a gay male gaze, which is kind of fun because usually it's the women who are sexualized in books, and I get to do it to the men, which is really, really fun. A really good friend of mine who's a lesbian journalist always tells me that I have no idea what the women in your books look like, but I know exactly where every hair is on the men. And so I think that there's originally when I was writing the books, I was trying to make it, I was fascinated by the idea, and you probably remember this, Jane, there was in the late 1990s, there was somebody who blew into town, which happens a lot in New Orleans. People come to New Orleans and reinvent themselves, and you never know what's true and what's not true. This guy came in and he was all about raising money for queer equality and helping out gay nonprofits and so forth. And he turned out to be a con artist, and he stole money from a whole bunch of people and then just disappeared overnight. And I was really interested in the whole concept of how, as queer people, we have a tendency, if someone is queer, we automatically take them at face value, that they're a good person, but that's not necessarily the case. But we have a tendency, because we don't run into, regardless of where you live or how you live or where you work or whatever, you don't run into queer people as often as you run into straight people. So there's always, at least in our generation, there's always that element of, oh yeah, another gay man, another gay man. And then they could tell you a bunch of lies and you would just believe everything they told you because you have that gay connection. We have that similarity going on. So that's what I kind of explored in my first book. I've kind of moved away from that in more books because straight people are so much more twisted. and they make the best villains.
I think for me, it's especially after I started writing, some of the best responses that you get back from readers is that they finally see themselves in a book. You know, you might have grew up reading the Hardy Boys or, you know, some of the other mysteries, but there's no one like you in those books. So, you know, to see strong female characters and they're in love and they're not, you know, mentally ill. There are a lot of people that die, but you should try not to kill the main character. But so they do live happily ever after, and you can. I mean, you know, you could be with a partner for years, and to kind of do away with some of those stereotypes that we love family and tradition and as much as the next person, but they finally see themselves. So I hear from a lot of like 15-year-olds, and you're kind of trying to figure yourself out a little bit, and then they're starting to see themselves in those books, so that I try to kind of infuse it with, it's not all, you know, like especially in film, before, maybe not now so much, but you always have that gay character and then they die. It's a horrific death at the end. It was like, shit, maybe I should go through this conversion there, but you know, it was kind of, because you just didn't, there was never really that good role model. So that's why I try to put into my books that it's not the end of the world. I mean, high school will be a very short blip in your life, and you get to move on from there and make your own life, make your own friends, make your own family.
That's my favorite reason too. I love it when someone comes and says that I can totally relate to your main character and it inspired me, you know, things like that. Those are always really great things to hear. But when I started my series, my idea was to have a crime against the queer community be the centerpiece that each novel would revolve around that. And that's sort of fallen away a little bit. The first one is about, it sort of centers around ex-gay ministries. And one of the things that I think drove me to write crime, and especially in a queer community situation, is that not only am I queer, but then also too, that when I was in college, there was a serial killer who was working in Indiana. And I remember that it wasn't on the news, it wasn't anywhere. I heard it from the LGBTQ Alliance at my college. They were handing out like handouts, big handwritten, like, here's a picture of who we think this man is, and it was just a shadow. Stay away from this person if you see them in the gay bars, in Indianapolis, things like that. And in the end, when he was caught, Herbert Baumeister had killed, like, I think his total numbers were close to 20 gay men that he had killed. And nobody talked about it at all. I mean, it just like, it was like a little blip on the front page of the paper, and that was it. And so I was like, I cannot believe people are talking about it. And so I wanted to bring awareness too to the fact of the crimes that have been against the gay community, already too. And so a lot of people told me they didn't know, or a lot of readers say, like, I didn't know about this. So that's why.
I write very much from the queer community in Toronto, which is extremely multicultural, multi-ethnic, and I love the vibrancy of all the combination of everything that gets mixed up there. So Dan's best friend is a black man. He has a child with a Muslim woman who he slept with only once. She seduced him. He was in love with her brother, and so convinced himself that he might be in love with her too, as he was trying to stay half in the closet. So I try to bring in as much of the community as I can. I realized over the course of the books that most of these stories do center around men, so I made the next one, which will be coming up next year, specifically female-centric. So all the good gals and the bad gals, they're all women, and I had a lot of fun taking it out of the sphere of the male-centric storyline that I normally write and putting it in a female world.
Staying kind of on the same thing, has writing LGBTQ, lesbian, gay affected your career? Has it helped it? Has it hurt it? How does it affect your place as a writer in the community?
It's hard to say. It really is, because obviously when you write about queer characters from a queer perspective, you're going to not draw in a lot of people. I don't know. I was told when I started writing that I shouldn't write about gay characters if I wanted to have a career, that I would not have a career, and that when you write mysteries, you can't really, mystery readers don't like sex, is what I was told, in the books, in the book. Well, having been to some mystery conference, I don't know. But that it would turn people away. But at the same time, I know a lot of people, there are also a lot of straight writers, heterosexual writers in the mystery world who are like 2 and done, 3 and out, and that's it. Whereas we have a smaller niche market, but it's very loyal. And they'll sustain you in a longer career. Whereas if the kind of numbers that I had, the kind of sales numbers that I have would get me dropped if I was a mainstream writer. I would not get picked up again. But because I'm with a smaller press, the costs are lower. They don't need to sell as many copies as HarperCollins needs to sell in order to make a profit. So I think in some ways that benefits us in some ways, but on the other hand, it kind of holds us back in some ways because people are afraid like reading our books are going to turn them or something. It's like dream on. But I don't know. It's hard to say because I didn't go that way. And there are some queer writers who write mainstream and are very successful, and also do some queer stuff with smaller presses on the side. But the vast majority of hugely successful people I know that are crime writers that are queer do not write queer stuff at all. And the only reason I even know that they're queer is because I've met them and, yeah. Not fooling anyone. But there's been, right now there's another surge in mainstream publishing. People who've been around a long time know that there's this boom and bust cycle with publishing. It's like suddenly everyone in New York's like, hey, we should publish gays and lesbian stuff because there's a big untapped market right there, and then they throw a lot of money at a bunch of people for a couple of years, and then the sales aren't there, and then it just all dies away again. I mean, we've seen this how many times, and it's starting again now. I can see it happening again now in the push for diverse voices. We need to have this, but in every instance, it's like each publisher has one. Okay, I got my lesbian, we're good. This publisher, oh, I got my gay writer, we're good. That's all we need. But then you turn around and then the sales aren't there, and then it's because it's your fault. It's always your fault, by the way. It's never the publisher's fault. It's always your fault. And so I don't know. I get excited for these new writers who are getting discovered and getting contracts with these big publishers, but at the same time, I kind of don't want to be a downer and say, you need to enjoy the ride because it may not last.
Yes, we may end up bitter and twisted like the rest of us.
Oh, Gene, we started bitter and twisted.
Okay, you got me. Other thoughts? Jeffrey, Allie, Meredith.
I won't say a lot, I don't get a lot of fan letters, but I do get mail from straight women who say they enjoy my books. What happens to the straight guys, I don't know. Maybe they just won't jump that fence and take a chance. I'm not really sure. So I know my books are appreciated by people who are not queer, but how they would get into their hands, I'm not entirely sure. Occasionally get irate letters from people who mistakenly buy my other books and thinking they're mysteries, and I'll quote one. What the fuck was that? There's no story. That was about a poetry book in particular. So I don't know how these things work, but I do know I was quite surprised to go on my publisher's website when this book came out and see that I was listed under LGBTQ, and that is a new thing. They just used to list me under mystery writer, so I don't know if that's to say we're going to help you by niching you more, micro-niching you and boost the sales, or if it's to segregate me somehow. I really don't know what the rationale is. I haven't actually had a chance to talk to the marketing people, so I assume there is a reason behind it. When I first saw it, I thought, no, why can't I just be a mystery writer? But they've decided this, so I don't know. We'll have to see how it goes.
They'll always put that on there. Always. You're never just a mystery writer. You're never just a horror writer. You're never just a romance writer. You're a lesbian romance writer. You're a gay horror writer. You're a transgender mystery writer. They always, always, always put that further adjective in front of the next adjective, which then defines what you write. And queer always trumps whatever comes after it. Always trumps whatever comes after it. You're not going to find the gay writers, the lesbian writers, the transgender writers in the mystery section or in the horror section. You're going to find it in gay lesbian studies, buried up there with sociology textbooks on the upper floor of Barnes & Noble in the dark corner with a glory hole. Allegedly, I've heard.
Actually, this last book, Answering the Call, when it came out on Amazon, I was really surprised because at first it was it ranked pretty high actually on just mystery, which shocked the shit out of me. But then like Greg said, then after a couple of weeks, then they added the gay, lesbian, mystery, suspense, that kind of thing. But I think Greg is right also too in that because I'm with a smaller publisher, it's not HarperCollins, but they do put a lot into having writers who sell more than some of the other writers, but it also they make enough money to give those younger writers a chance to be able to then write, take a chance. You might find the next Greg Herren, Gene, but it's but to me, it's the fans that I've had from the beginning have been very loyal, and I think it's one of the reasons that I'm still doing this. And the minute you start getting a lot of emails, that are like, okay, maybe it's time to retire, then I'll maybe think about it. But up to now, it's been really great. Of all the conferences I go to, some of the people you get to meet, and they start telling you stories about, they know, sometimes they know the characters better than you do, because they've read the books more than once. They can quote by page and paragraph, and I'm like, ooh. I have to study that for a minute. But they found something in it that helped them through whatever. Carly Sound was one of the first ones, about a honey who lost a partner to cancer. And this lady in P-Town comes up to me every year and says she reads it on a yearly basis. Kind of the same thing happened to her. So it's kind of a community. It's maybe not as big a community as the mainstream, but it's still a community, and it's still something that gets you through the day because you find friends and family members that help you through it.
And my path was a little. I had two professors who were really important to me when I was going through school, and one of them pushed me in the direction of going mainstream. And he was like, "You could be a queer horror writer. You could sell books." And so I wrote my letters to the agents, and I sent them all out with his help. And nobody ever contacted me back. But every once in a while, I'd give them a nibble or something like that, where they'd ask for more. And then right when I was at the end of school, at the end of grad school, I did get an agent. It was crazy. I couldn't believe I got this agent. And actually I found out it was because one of my professors knew this person, it was a favor. And so I worked with him for a couple of months, and his biggest complaints to me were about my main character, and it always came down to, if she wasn't a lesbian, I'd be able to sell this book so much easier. If she wasn't so out, then we could maybe, pose it as a different type of a book. I'm like, it's a lesbian thriller. Like, she is a lesbian, you can't hide that. So we went round and round and round, and he gave me all kinds of suggestions, like, what about if, she has a niece who's gay, and so and the niece comes to live with her, and so there's gay issues that come up because of that, and in the end, I'm not gonna change it. So I ended up dropping him, and then another professor that I had was like, there's all of these books that are being published in these indie markets, and you really need to try that. And so that's when I, decided, okay, I'll try it. So it didn't work out for me very well, and it probably was at a time with the downhill. I don't know, or maybe the downwards.
It's kind of crazy how the cycle in Americans, as a general rule, one of my favorite things about Americans and as a society and as a country is we have no long-term memory. And I mean, I think there was a poll done in Louisiana a few years ago where 68% of the people polled blamed Obama for the Katrina response when he was a senator from Illinois. And publishing's the same way. It's like, I don't know if it's because there's a lot of turnover in the publishing houses, because you don't make any money working for a publisher unless you're way up in the ranks. So it's a revolving door on the lower levels, but they don't seem to remember that, well, what did we do wrong the last time we tried to reach the beer market? No, let's just do the same thing. It'll work this time.
All right, well, I'm gonna change the subject a little bit. Of course, we could probably talk about this all afternoon. I know Greg and I could, because we have.
Because we have.
Yeah, come get us at the bar. We would see the true twist of bitter. Mysteries are often in encompassed setting. And I know that, Meredith, you have Ohio, Greg and Allie, New Orleans, Jeffrey, Toronto. Talk about the role of setting in your mysteries, and how much of a role does it play, and what does it mean to how you construct your mystery?
All right. Well, setting is, it's incredibly important to me, and mostly because I love this land that I'm writing about, but it's also a land that has pulled in real life, not just in my books, but in real life, there's been 3 active serial killers in southeastern Ohio. And it's this beautiful rural area that's filled with farmland, and so
Lots of places to hide bodies.
lots of places to hide
There you go.
bodies, yeah. But the setting plays a really important role for me, because I think that sometimes crime grows out of the area, or that when crime happens, it sort of ripples out, and there's these waves that kind of go out from the crime that hit everything that's around it. And so the setting, to me, just really sets up everything about the crime. And I spend a lot of time in my books, probably too much. I've gotten complaints that I spend too much time talking about the trees and the and everything like that. So setting, yes.
Well, when you write about New Orleans, you New Orleans is a character in and of itself. You can't get away from that. And New Orleanians are very, very protective of New Orleans. So if you get something wrong, you're going to hear about it for a really, 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 really long time, and even if you live here. And
How deep is Lake Pontchartrain?
Yeah. 19 years, Gene.
It's been
19 years. But Bill Lofhelm is a local crime writer. It has this really funny phrase about there's people who are nollier than thou. But it's true, and New Orleans is. But the great thing about New Orleans is the city has so many different faces and so many different communities, and each neighborhood has its own character, and you kind of can draw on that to help build your story, and because really characters are kind of who are influenced by where they live, especially in New Orleans, because it affects every aspect of your life when you live here. Like, how many times do you get trapped in your house by second line, Gene? I live inside the parade route, so during Mardi Gras, I have to plan my entire life around when I can get my car in and out of my neighborhood. Otherwise, I'm never going to get home. And I personally love descriptions of the trees and things like that. I like to feel like I'm there, that the person who's writing about the place knows that place and makes me, because that's an important part of the story. You have to really be able to relate to the characters, and you have to see the place where it's taking place and to immerse yourself in it. People who don't describe places, you know, like Perry Mason was on I read all 10,000 Earl Stanley Gardner's Perry Mason books, but there was never any description of anything and anything. It could have been Los Angeles, it could have been Chicago, it could have been San Diego, it could have been anywhere. Because they always went to the same place to get hamburger sandwiches, and they always went to this place to get coffee, and it was almost all dialogue. And that's a trick in and of itself. But that's not the kind of writer I want to be. I want my people who read my stuff, to read my work, to feel like they're actually there, that they can sense New Orleans or wherever I set the story, that they can see the place, and that it's part. And that makes it, the experience of reading much more powerful, I think. I could be wrong.
No, you're not.
Not likely, but I
Jeffrey?
I started with the objective of putting Toronto on the literary map, not just in the mysteries, but before that. And Canada in general, but Toronto in particular, has been erased in so many ways from art, particularly in films. I can't tell you how many American films I've seen set in New York that I think, wait a minute, that's my neighborhood, and that's so-and-so's neighborhood. It can be, if you take away most of the major landmarks, it can be a very generic city. And publishers were very reluctant to publish, Canadian publishers were very reluctant to publish books set specifically in Toronto because they did not sell. Margaret Atwood got away with it, okay, fine. Michael Ondaatje a little bit, but usually he starts in Toronto and then goes somewhere else. He goes outside. So specifically, it is a very fascinating, vibrant city. It's a nice looking city, and I know some of the neighborhoods that make it quite unique that most Torontonians don't. I know some of the history that makes it quite unique. The entire downtown was wiped out by fire twice, once around 1849, the second time around 1906. And nobody knows this, and we don't even get taught this in it. But probably today they're teaching it in history, but we don't get taught this. So I know these very interesting niches. One place is called the Brickworks, where most of the buildings that were burned down twice, the bricks were made and to restore the city twice. But most people say, well, what is the Brickworks? They don't even produce anything. I said, no, it's historic. They used to produce the bricks that this city was built from. So I know a lot of these settings. I know a lot of the locations, and some of them are incredibly interesting. There's the first wave of Irish settlers moved to a place where they brewed whiskey, so it was called the Distillery District. People moved away because it became very unfashionable, and it's one of the few reasons that this district has stayed almost untouched for, I don't know how long, many years, because Toronto has a history of anything that's more than 40 years old, we tear it down. Because it's old, it's not interesting. But the Distillery District was not popular, nobody went there, and nobody wanted to buy it. So suddenly some brilliant person said, hey, let's restore this area. If you go there, it's like walking back in history. And it's got the distillery vats. It's got everything that used to be there when this area was first constructed. It's a fascinating place. But for many years there was nothing there. It was just boarded up and shut up, and so we all thought, well, they'll tear it down someday. So I have a habit of finding these places. They fascinate me, and finding them and using them as settings in the book. And still, Torontonians who read the book say, "Are you sure that's real?" I say, "Go, just take a look, and you will actually see it there." So that was my objective, was to put Toronto on the map. It's particularly in the mysteries.
Yeah, New Orleans, to me, it is a character in the book. I mean, how can it not be? Greg's right. I mean, it's full of characters. Just walking down the street, you can chat with a couple of people, you can sit in a bar. It's not very often you sit in bars, and there's a little plaque, like so-and-so drank themselves to death here. It's actually a place right down the street. But to me, it's just a vibrant, eclectic, compared it to like a woman, sometimes she's dressed up and fancy going to a ball, and sometimes she's just a streetwalker and kind of tawdy, but it's just something that I wasn't born here. I'm originally from Cuba, but came when I was 5, lived here ever since, and it's just an area that you are very protective of. I mean, a lot, maybe we're the butt of the joke for a lot of the country, but if you live here, there's no place like it, ever. I mean, the food, the drinks, the people, there just isn't another place like this.
All right, next question is, what moment do you start to write a book, and what creates that moment? And I think most of us who are writers know that you don't start to write a book by sitting down at your typewriter or your computer screen and staring at that blank page. The book starts someplace else. It starts somewhere in your brain, somewhere in your idea. So how is that process for you?
I'll tell you, in the Calling the Dead book, it did start, if you lived here during Katrina and you were lucky enough not to have to tear up your house, which I wasn't that lucky, you got to a point where you eventually had to take a break. The mold that everybody was so excited about because they thought it had, gone extinct 300 years ago. It's now growing all up your wall. You just couldn't take it anymore. So we actually, we rented a condo somewhere in Florida, and we were going to take a weekend off just to go sit and decompress a little bit. And I was driving through New Orleans East. And I mean, New Orleans East, y'all remember during the storm, it was like leaving Technicolor, like the quarter really got a scrubbing. Nothing happened to the quarter. The French, maybe George Bush didn't like the French, but the French knew what the hell they were doing. They built a section that did not flood. So here you came, like we were here the weekend, Café du Monde opened up. I mean, they opened up right away. Some of the bars never actually closed. But we came to New Orleans, but as we were driving out, I hadn't been to the east yet. So we crossed that industrial canal. And the best way I could describe it was you left like a Technicolor film and you entered a black and white world. Everything was covered in this grayish brown film. And New Orleans East was home to a lot of African Americans. It's also home to, it's kind of like Car Row. Every city has one. It's where the GMC dealer is, the Dodge dealership. So it's all these car dealerships, but they were underwater for like a couple of weeks. So all these cars in the lot all looked like this grayish brown. They were covered in this film kind of stuff, that the water had left. It wasn't real clean water, so once they were able to pump it out, that's what was left. So like I said, as I was driving through, I mean, obviously the first thing that comes to your mind is all these people who lost their homes, but then that was the second thing that came to my head. Gosh, if you were a serial killer, you could really just kill anybody here. There'd be no one to hear you for blocks and blocks. So that's where the serial killer from Calling the Dead was born. And it was, for once, you were on the side of the police. In the Cain Casey series, you're really not on the side of the police. But in this case, you were, and it was, this police officer. She's gay and she's a detective, but she's single. Her sister and her niece actually were lost. They drowned during Katrina. So she comes from a kind of a damaged place. But that's actually that drive to Florida was where that book was born. So.
I get ideas from everywhere. Everything. I get title ideas. I get first line ideas. I don't know where it comes from. It just, that's a great opening line. Now I have to figure out a story that'll fit. That's a really good title. What was that story? The main story in my short story collection is called Survivor's Guild, and it was nominated for a MacLeod Award. And it was a roof story. guy that's sitting on his roof after Katrina waiting to be rescued and remembering what he went through and the bad decision to not leave, and then you find out his wife is downstairs floating. And so yeah, I don't know where it all comes from for me. I have files and pages and notes and everything everywhere. I'll never write everything that I want to write because I just have ideas and stuff all the time. Usually, the Scotty book I just turned in that's coming out this fall is because I was fascinated with the Real Housewives, and I thought, well, it would be a great Real Housewives of New Orleans. And because you live here long enough, you know the people who would be on the show.
Definitely.
And it's like, oh yeah, that would be, she would never do it, but she would do it. And that was a lot of fun. That's a lot of fun. The book I'm writing now, is based on an old family legend, which I know is bullshit, because my family has always been white trash, I'm sorry. But how Southern people from rural, remote parts of Alabama will come up with these amazing stories of what their families were like before the war. Bitch, please. Bitch, please. And then the apocryphal story. So I'm writing it, so I'm kind of taking this family legend and writing like it actually was a true story and turning it into a modern day ghost story because the old plantation house is being excavated by the University of Alabama's archaeology department. And I had that idea years ago. I always wanted to write about that legend, but it's a lie. It's not true. All the stories my grandmother told me when I was a kid, none of it was true. None of it was true.
All of the stories in the Doench mysteries are based on something true, not necessarily a crime. One of the books was called The Jade Butterfly. I dated a guy from Beijing who was shot at Tiananmen Square, and that was the inspiration for that. I thought, okay, what happens when you do that and then later you end up in Canada? I didn't cannibalize his story, but it was the beginning for that. As some of you will know, there was a serial killer who was in Toronto who was sent to jail, or I guess his sentence was determined in January of this year, which happened to be the same month that the book came out. I started this book after seeing the third missing man poster in the queer neighborhood. I remember walking down the street with a friend of mine and said, oh my God, there's another poster, how many is that? And we both started to go, oh yeah, that's the third one. So we in the queer community knew there was something going on. But when you went online to look into it, there was nothing about queer murders or missing gay men. It was just murders. Nothing to say that all of the men who disappeared, and there were 8 eventually, that they all disappeared from the gay community. Nobody said that. The police were denying right up until the last minute that it was a serial killer. The things that I could find online were irate family members or friends of people saying, my friend's missing, he left his cat that he bought a week ago, I went to the police, they will not pay any attention to me. They told one of them, oh, we understand that your friend was a drug user, he's probably on, he's out of his mind, he'll be back in a couple of weeks. Somebody else said, yeah, we heard of a guy like him, I think he was caught for selling drugs, so he's probably in prison, but nobody took it seriously. The chief of police actually shut down the investigation at one point, said we cannot find anything that says there's a serial killer here or that there's anything linking all of these murders. And we knew it was idiocy. But that was the starting point for me. Is I thought, what would this story look like if I were looking at it? If somebody were looking at it as a real serial killer. I finished it, handed it in, and a month later, Bruce McArthur, who is the murderer, was arrested. So this story is not the real story. There are some eerily similar details from what turned out to be the real story. But he was arrested a month after I turned the book into my publisher, and he was sentenced the month that the book came out. So there was a lot of strange parallels going on in the story.
I listen to all the crime feeds. I watch all of the investigation discovery shows, and 2020, all that stuff. And so usually there's something that is a true crime that sparks my interest, but then when I start writing about it, it twists and turns so that it's not really about so much about that particular real crime anymore. And sometimes too, I write about something that I'm feeling. So the book that I'm getting ready to come out is called Deadeye, and it is about a serial killer who's escaped from prison and is on the run. And the feeling that I wanted to write about for my main character was that there's no safe place, that we're always exposed. And so I started with that feeling, and part of this, I think, well, actually, if I'm being truthful, all of it, was that at the time that I was starting to kind of build this book is that we were going through shooter training at our school, so that what happens if someone pulls out a gun in your classroom, what do you do? And so those thoughts that I was having of if you can't be safe here, where am I going to be safe? So starting with a feeling sometimes is how I work, and then building out from that, what crime would be most detrimental versus that feeling. So
Switches, what does it cost you to write a book? And not in terms of money so much, but time is what you do. Things like this weekend is great, but it's like, oh my God, I'm got my deadline coming up, and I really need to be writing a book. So what trade-offs do you make to be a writer?
I don't know. I don't really know. I've always been kind of, you learn that you have to be really selfish, and you have to not care that other people think that you're selfish. For a long period of time when I was working for Hayward, I worked at home. And it is amazing how, if you work at home, everyone you know thinks that you can do favors for them because you have all this free time. And it used to, and it would drive me crazy because it's like, oh, well, yeah, I can pick that up for you. Yeah, I can drop that off for you. Yeah, it's like, no, I'm not your assistant.
Yeah, exactly.
And my job is my job. And just because I'm lucky enough to get to work at home doesn't turn me into it doesn't mean that I'm available for picking people up at the airport and dropping off packages and making sure this gets done. And I don't know, it's just, now that I'm older, I don't. I gave up, I don't drink near as much as I used to because it takes too much out of me. When I used to be able to drink a lot and recover the next morning, feel perfectly fine and get up and work. But then, that ain't the case anymore. Now it's like a 2-day recovery period. I can't afford to lose that time. I've become very, very ruthlessly efficient because my writing time is so precious and so rare, and I've got to make sure that nothing interferes with it. So it's like I become very, okay, when I have errands to run, I sit down and I figure out what the most efficient way and the fastest way I can get all of that done so that I can get back home as fast as I possibly can, which has unfortunately become a compulsion, which is very, well, because when I don't always have to be doing that.
3 seconds less. Yay.
Yeah, exactly. And so I stopped answering, I unplugged my home phone in like 2003 and never plugged it back in. And at least the number still works, but there's no telling how many voice messages. But I also have learned I have to shut the internet off if I'm at work completely, because I can't have my phone near the computer because it's very easy to just pick up your phone and see what's going on Facebook or whatever. I don't know. I don't go. I don't do a lot of going to dinners and going to parties and having a social life, basically. But I kind of like not having a social life. I like being reclusive. And I think most people prefer me reclusive. No one seems to mind. No one seems to mind.
Maybe Hallie.
Yeah, for me, because I have a full-time job, and so I write when I can. I try to do it every night when I get home from work, or right before I get to bed. I get up early and I do it. Then on the weekends, Greg's right. Sometimes you're selfish. If you have a partner and they want to go somewhere, and you're like, yeah, no. I have a deadline coming up, so it's always trying to beat those deadlines. But it's rewarding, but it does take a lot of time. I mean, it's hours and hours of your life that you spend by yourself. But I like my own company, so I'm okay with it. But it is kind of giving up some of those parties, some of the dinners out, some family time to be able to get it done. But you get to hold that book, so it's worth it in the end.
Meredith, Jeffrey. Jeffrey, go for it.
I actually, is my mother in the room? No, I actually gave up a career. I was fairly successful as a television producer. Contract didn't pay a lot anyway, but it actually paid my bills. So that's been about 12 years since I gave up television producing, and my debt has risen. But I just sat down one day and I thought, if I'm going to be the writer I always thought I was, I have to give up all the other things that stand in the way. So I did that. I'm glad I did it. I'm not glad I'm poor. But that was, if I had lived to the end of my life and said, I'm not the writer that I wanted to be, I would be much more miserable than I already am. So.
I haven't given up very much because I don't really have much of a life to give up. So the social aspect, I mean, I'm very introverted and very quiet, so there wasn't a whole lot of social stuff to give up. But I do think that the one thing I have given up, especially I was thinking about this year when I was writing, is that I'm a lot more scared now of the dangers of the world and of what people might be thinking, even though they might look like they're doing nothing. Well, what are they thinking? So my peace of mind, I mean, I think I've lost some of that with this.
All right, now we're at the point that everyone, I'm sure, has been waiting for. It's turn it over for questions for the audience. Yes, Eric.
Last year, Greg gave me great advice about writing a mystery thriller novel, saying to talk to the police if you have questions. So my question to the other four of you is, have you ever contacted the police and said, what's the process for this? Or any of the other law enforcement agencies?
At one point, I had 3 police officers in my immediate family, so I would just pick up the phone and say, what's the deal on this? Actually, I got a lot of conflicting information, but when I would whittle it down, I realized who was the one who was fabricating and didn't know they were fabricating, and who actually had the story down. So that was my process.
Yeah, for me, actually with Bold Strokes, BK Powell kind of went through every single aspect of police work, so she really helped me out with this last book. And then as far as Cain and the FBI, we're lucky enough, I live very close to it, become really good friends with. She's a profiler for the FBI.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and you would look at her, you'd never guess.
You wouldn't profile it?
Yeah, like you wouldn't guess FBI. This little tiny thing, and it's she's got the little ID and everything. It's kind of funny. We were in New York, and we were kind of a girls trip, and I was at the bar with her, and this guy, and she's really cute. So this guy looks at her and he said, "Hey, can I buy you a drink? I'm in the FBI." And he shows this thing, and she's like, "Oh, can I see that?" And then she looks at it, and she's like, "This is not you." And he said, oh, my friend lets me borrow it to pick up girls. I'm like,
Isn't
hold on a
that
minute.
illegal?
I'm in the FBI. It's illegal. So we got our drinks and we went back and they were like, what the hell did y'all tell that guy? He like ran out of here. So yeah, so it is good to have, contacts that can tell you right from wrong.
I actually, when I was first writing this, I needed more information from the law enforcement side. So I did a search in the area that I was in my county and the county next to mine to find any female detectives that were on staff so that I could, and the way that I approached them was this, that I wanted to talk to them and do a ride-along so that I could talk to them about their job and how they felt. And once they found out I was writing a book from the female viewpoint, they were just like, oh my God. Well, and the truth is I only found one. So she was like, oh my God, yes, you can write with me every day. So she was really excited, and she was able to help a lot. But then in the last year, someone introduced me to someone who works for the FBI, and he's been more of a contact that I've used lately. But I think if you can find someone who fits sort of the description that you're trying to work with, age bracket, the gender, and then to kind of target them a little bit and talk to them, that helps a lot.
Thank you.
Yes, Christian.
In what ways and how do you resist the notion of the LGBT genre, or do you?
How do we resist?
I'm sorry, can you repeat it again?
Yeah.
The old people up here can't.
I can't hear.
That's all right, I can project. How do you resist the notion of the so-called LGBT genre, or do you? Is there a way to turn that to your advantage?
Oh yeah, especially now, because they're all about, now that all the, there's a big push for diversity. So if you're in like a big writers organization, like Mystery Writers of America or Sisters in Crime, they're always looking for people to teach classes on diversity, and they pay you to do that. I got paid $500 to talk for an hour about creating gay characters. It was amazing, amazing, and I didn't even prepare. I just got up and talked. I got a standing ovation and a check for $500. I was like, this I can do. This really, really works. There's a real issue going on in the Romance Writers of America right now about their awards, because all of their award finalists were white, straight women, and there were no people of color, no queer characters, no nothing like that. That's been blowing up a lot. The mystery genre has been really lucky for the most part that we haven't had that kind of problem. I was on the board for MWA for 4 years, and so I worked really hard to give queer writers a voice in MWA. I don't know how well I succeeded at that, but Jean's on the
We're
board
still
now,
working on it.
and I think I'm going back on the board next year. Yeah, sucker, they saw me coming. But you can use it, but even though it feels kind of, I don't know, icky. It's like, oh yeah, you need a gay, so I'll be your gay. But at the same time, a lot of those women that I spoke to when I taught that class for sisters, their next books had gay characters in them, which they didn't have before. So and they didn't all die. So
I think you open doors for people.
you open doors
That's
for
what,
people, and it helps. And the more visible you are, the more I really encourage writers to join writers organizations and make yourself heard, because you can make a difference. When I think MWA is getting better. Sisters in Crime ironically, Sisters in Crime began as a diversity organization because women crime writers were getting treated the same as male crime writers, and now they've expanded to writers of color and queer writers. And it's real. I actually write their diversity column for them in their quarterly newsletter, and I'm always stuck for ideas, so let me know. But there's also, at the same time, there's this whole weird thing going on in YA fiction, where the cancellation culture, it's like, oh, how dare you write a book about this, that's not your experience, and the book ends up not getting published, and people are giving their content, and I'm like, fuck you. Like, no, that's not. I get really annoyed, and I understand the importance of like gay films and major production gay films that were based on books, but has anyone else noticed that all the big gay movies were written by straight people? The books were written by straight people, like Call Me By Your Name was written by a straight man, Love, Simon was written by a straight lady, and you can kind of tell because Simon has no sex drive whatsoever. He's a teenage boy, come on. Like, he's not looking up porn on the internet, bitch, please.
Okay.
But not for me. We have, in Canada, we have a nice number of grants for writers. There are always more writers than grants, obviously. But we've been politically correct for so many years that always say, identify yourself if you are of this particular minority or that. And there are always 5 categories. And it's never LGBTQ, so I always write that in, just so someone will say, oh, someone you know on the granting committee will say, oh, maybe that's a valid minority as well.
Oh, another way you can work it to your advantage is to get banned. You get banned.
How do you do that?
You get banned, man. You sell a lot of books. I got banned
For 6 years.
I got banned in Virginia, and it was amazing. The death threats, I could live with that. But I sold a lot of books. I sold a lot of books.
So how did you get banned?
Oh, I was invited to speak to a gay student group at a suburban Richmond, Virginia high school, and the female gym teacher, who was also the softball coach,
Oh my God. One cliche.
whose name was Rusty, and lived with the home ec teacher, complained and brought it to the school board. Oh yeah, they even had an exorcism at the high school to exorcise the demons of homosexuality out of the high school. I was like, you won't even let me set, and I was banned. I could not even set foot on school property. Not just my books were banned, I was personally banned. And so I was gonna end up speaking to like 10 kids total. I ended up speaking at the MCC to 150 people, and they all bought books. And so it's like, no, they ban me again, please. So they, and then the next year, the House of Delegates, which is everywhere else is the House of Representatives, but in Virginia they're different. Somebody tried to ban gay student groups at all publicly funded schools because of me. And they used me as the example when they brought the bill up for a vote. It did not pass, but I am forever in the congressional record in the state of Virginia as gay porn writer Greg Herren.
And on that note,
I like my
on that high note, actually I'm going to give everyone about 30 seconds to have any last words.
I have one more question. Is there anything that is still taboo in being a gay mystery writer or lesbian mystery writer?
Don't
Something
spill
you
cats.
cannot touch.
Yeah.
You can't kill a pet.
Yeah.
I found that. You can't kill a pet, no matter what.
That,
You can
can't
feed
kill
a guy
animal,
through a meat grinder. You can't touch
but you
a
kill a
dog.
cat. And you'll
That's
hear
your
about it the
ass.
rest of your life. Pedophilia too.
Yeah.
That's a big one. I'm not going to say you can't touch that, but it's not a comfortable place.
Yeah.
And a lot of people. There was a really amazing book written. It wasn't a mystery, but it was 20 years ago. There was an author named Keith Banner who wrote a book called The Life I Lead from the Perspective of a Pedophile who had also been molested as a child. And the book alternated between his point of view as he was falling for this 6-year-old boy and the person who had abused him. It's one of the most phenomenal books I've ever read. It was so fucking creepy because it was so real. but it destroyed his career because it was so well written. Everyone thought he was a pedophile. And I think he published another collection of short stories like 9 years later, but it was phenomenal. And it's like the thing that was really interesting to me, and I always bring this up whenever I can, is it was just Lolita
Turned around.
turned around, and everyone reads Lolita, and Lolita is the greatest novel that's ever written. But you write about a man who's lusting after a young boy, and that you just can't. That's horrifying. That's the worst thing you could possibly do. It's like, oh, that's kind of shitty because girls go through so much, you know. But
That's a whole other matter.
that's a whole other.
And unfortunately, we are out of time. So thank you all. And remember that there are books still upstairs, possibly, or any other place. And there will be a closing session at